Well, we'll call it 10 o'clock. This is the Pine County Board of Commissioners. Today, Terry Lupgren will be attending the board meeting by electronic means. He is located at 18078 East Ida Drive, Centennial, Colorado. And Josh Moore has an excused absence business. Anyway, the public is invited to call in. And with that, we will call the meeting to order and rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, public forum. Is there anybody here that wishes to speak at public forum? Anybody online? All right, we'll look to adopt the agenda.
Mr. Chair, we have one deletion from the agenda, number 4 under the regular agenda, Land Zoning Advisory Committee report. That committee report will be made at the August 2nd regular board meeting.
All right. Anybody got anything else?
I'll move as amended.
Wait a second. Got a motion by Ludwig, second by Waldham. Terry, are you hearing us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay, we will, because you're remote, we will do roll call.
District,
No discussion. Debbie, you want to call the roll?
District 1, Commissioner Holland.
Yes.
District 3, Commissioner Lupgren.
Yes.
District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Yes.
We'll look for the approval of the minutes of July 5th, the regular county board meeting and summary for publication.
I can move that.
Thanks, Terry.
I'll second.
Motion by Lundgren, second by Ludwig. Any discussion? If not, Debbie, you want to call the roll?
District 3, Commissioner Lupgren.
Yes.
District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Commissioner Holland.
Yes. And then the minutes and correspondence. Lassard Sam Outdoor Heritage Council, notification letter and project list. Pine County Chemical Health Coalition minutes from July 11th. And the Pine County Health Insurance Committee from June 30th.
I'll second.
Motion by Ludwig, seconded by Lundgren. Any discussion? Not all in favor, say, whoops. Debbie, you want to call the roll?
District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Commissioner Holland.
Yes.
District 3, Commissioner Lupgren.
Yes. Sorry.
All right. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Had that in front of you for several days.
I'll move to pass the consent agenda.
Thanks.
Hang on a second.
Motion by Lovegren, second by Waldham to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Debbie?
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Commissioner Holland.
Yes.
District 3, Commissioner Lupgren.
Yes.
District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Regular agenda. The broadband committee met on July 5th. And we have some following recommendations. Are you going to go through those, Leslie, or do you want me to, or? Okay. Here's what we came up with. We got a total of 600,000 that we're granting out. This is money that we set aside from our ARPA funds. And here's what the committee came up with: 300,000 to East Central Energy for a total project that they have planned for 67 million. We've got 200,000 to Star Wire Technologies for the city of Rock Creek for a total project cost of 4.3 million. 75,000 to Savage Communications, SCI Partridge Township broadband expansion, total project of 1.5 million, and 25,000 to Midco Mid-Continent Communication for Cross Lake Trail for the total project of 67,000. So that's the committee's recommendation. And with that, I'll make that a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just a note on, originally we had contemplated multiple rounds of grants. And just want to update the other commissioners that the committee felt that the applications this round were really the projects that we wanted to support, and that if we did future rounds, we weren't going to get other better projects. And so that's why the recommendation is to bring all but $150,000 of the 750 into this round, so that there's $600,000 to be awarded today, and then 150,000 that will be held in reserve potentially for if the county has costs for implementing some of these projects, or if we do have some remaining funds, we can always do another grant round.
We're pretty excited about these projects. First of all, if East Central Energy can parlay the money they get into some border-to-border grants, that would be an awesome project across the county. Starwire, yeah.
And I think Ryan is working on getting a map that will show these projects.
Okay.
So I keep interrupting when you have a motion on the floor, though. Sorry.
I do have a motion, and I would look for a second for that motion before we.
I think Terry second.
Terry seconded it. Now we'll have a little discussion. But the map, you guys can see better than I can, but we really tried to hit the entire county. And so what ECE has scoped out for their border to border, where they're not going to be able to work in that particular grant, we have SCI working where others aren't working. We've got Starwire coming into the city of Rock Creek, which is really looks like a township to most people, but it's a long, skinny chunk of land that goes from the Wisconsin border to west of the freeway. So you got about 20 miles there. And it's a hard, some of it not very densely populated, but some of it has some pretty good pockets of density. And Midco has come in and is building a fiber to the home in one particular development. And Starwire is going to kind of pick up the rest of that township or city. And then Midco has been doing some fiber to the home, not only in Rock Creek, but on the northeast corner of Cross Lake, which had zero service. And there's a small little neighborhood that was outside of the scope of their project. And so we encourage them to apply and pick up those probably a dozen homes is all it is, but it's they're not covered by anybody else, and so they would be an island. So I think we've hit pretty, kind of give it a shotgun approach, and I think we've done good, I think.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I think now that the projects are being projected, I think Leslie can describe where the various
Yeah,
grant awards are going.
with a lot more clarity than I saw.
Sure. Hi, Leslie Sutter, the Economic Development Coordinator for Pine County. Up on the map, we have a lot of things kind of up there, there's a lot of colors, but you can see that starting from the south, City of Rock Creek, that was one of the projects for this that we are going to contribute some funds to Star Wire Technologies. The green, that's kind of labeled Pine South, as well as the light pink to the north, that's Pine North. That's East Central Energy's border to border project area. And then the light green or grayish to the east is the Reconnect area that we got some community funding through Stauber's office. So I wanted to show that project. In between that and the purple area is where our community development block grant coronavirus funding will go, but we don't have a layer for that yet, still coming from SCI broadband. And the purple is a bit larger because that's all of SCI's proposal, but we are proposing to help fund the Partridge Township one because the Finlayson Pine Lake and Hinckley one overlap Pine North for East Central Energy. But for the most part, we're covering a good portion of the county north to south based on the proposals that we got in. There is still a huge area up in the northeast that is not quite covered yet. That is, to be honest with you, the LTD broadband RDOF award area. So that's something we're still playing around with.
Thank you. I think we're, we've really tried to leverage the money we had with private investor money and with companies that can secure state funds and federal funds. So we're taking our little awards to give them a head start. Hopefully these projects will move forward. So with that, does anybody have any questions? That Debbie, we've got a motion and a second on the floor. You want to call the roll?
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District 3, Commissioner Lawson.
Yes.
District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
Thank you.
Personnel committee report.
I'll take that.
Okay.
We met on July 11th. And I'll just go through the list here. Health and Human Services, we acknowledge the resignation of registered nurse Amber Koski effective June 2022, and approve the backfill of the position and any subsequent vacancies that occur due to internal promotion transfer. We acknowledge the resignation of child protection worker Amy McDonald effective July 15th, and approve any backfill of that position and any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. We acknowledge the resignation of social worker Amber Andrews effective August 12th, 2022, and approve the backfill of that position and any subsequent vacancies that may occur due to internal promotion or lateral transfer. And we reduced one full-time employee to a half-time employee starting in October, and that's in reference to the UCare that we had discussed a lot previously. In the Sheriff's Office, we acknowledge the resignation of Correction Officer Troy Parker effective July 14th, 2022, and approve the backfill of any positions and subsequent vacancies that may occur due to lateral transfer or internal promotion. We acknowledge the resignation of part-time probationary corrections officer Kay Weimer effective June 30, 2022, and approve backfill position and any subsequent vacancies that occurred to lateral transfer. An auditor or treasurer, reduce the vacant full-time auditor clerk 3 position from from full-time to a 0.5 part-time position to 22.5 hours per week. And then hire an additional property appraiser in the assessor's office to cover additional workload. That position is a grade 8 with a minimum starting wage of 23.03 per hour. With that, I will make a motion to approve those.
We're looking for a second.
I can second that, Steve.
Lofgren seconds. Any discussion?
Yeah, I can. Sure. Maybe this is for the committee or maybe even Dave. With the number of five resignations, I think I've asked this before, and there's been quite a few. What's the exit interview process to try to see why? I mean, this is not a retirement or a transfer. This is people actually, a resignation is a quit, right? Quitting, leaving.
Yeah, and there's a variety of reasons, and Jackie is on the call, and I know she coordinates those exit interviews and can give a little insight as to specifics on some of these positions.
Are those reviewed when you are on your committee to see?
I know they always offer an exit interview, whether the employee takes it, we don't know, but we always request them to do that. So I think everything was, some were taking jobs, some were burning out, some were having babies, whatever. It's just.
Yeah, because with the current hiring situation out there, it'd be nice to figure out
And some move on to other jobs.
what's going on.
Yeah, we always ask, but I can't remember all the answers. If I find my notes here.
Jackie, do you have any?
Hi, yes, I'm Jackie Coivisto, Human Resources Manager, and I can comment. We do offer exit interviews to employees that are leaving Pine County. In some instances, employees elect not to participate, but that's fairly rare. But either we'll meet in person or employees may choose to just fill out the form. And it appears that the most common reason people are leaving is they're just they're finding other employment. They're moving on. Maybe they've taken a promotion, but I really haven't seen any trends that are really alarming where people are leaving because they're so unhappy. People are just electing to change careers or moving on to a different employer. And I think JJ, you asked about this at a couple meetings back or a few months back, and I did start a tracking log. So I am listing out reasons why people are leaving or capturing the data so that we can, look at trends going forward. And happy to share that with you, should you choose.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I don't know if Becky had popped on the screen, if she wanted to add anything, because she has a large number of employees.
Becky, did you want to say anything or not?
I sure can. I know that I too, when I look at it, I care a lot about my employees. I want them to do well. I want to recruit and retain the best employees. And in this environment, people are seeking other employment for lots of reasons, including just the high stress of the job. We had a child protection worker resign. The children's mental health worker is taking another position that suits her family life and her career goals probably a little bit better. But those are happy things for their families. And I think that we do a good job of making sure we're doing what we can to keep employees. And sometimes they're just leaving for better opportunities. And sometimes they're leaving for different positions because the work is difficult.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, Debbie, you want to call the roll?
District 3, Commissioner Lovegren.
Yes.
District 4, Commissioner Waldham.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
Thank you.
And new hire. Who's taking that?
Mr. Chair, I can take that. Ordinarily, this would have been on the consent agenda, but the vacancy was a part of the personnel committee report. So we had to wait until the board officially authorized backfilling the position. And so this is just to fill a vacancy of the children's mental health social position.
So I need a motion and a second for that.
I'll move it.
I can second.
Motion by Ludwig, second by Waldham. Any discussion? If not, Debbie?
District 4, Commissioner Waldem.
Yes.
District 5, Commissioner Ludwig.
Aye.
District 1, Chair Holland.
Yes.
District 3, Commissioner Loprin.
Yes.
Thank you.
We got the Wetland Conservation Act, David Demmer.
That's gonna next slide.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thank you. Good morning.
Morning.
Here, it's been a few years since I was able to come and talk to the Pine County Commissioners. At that point, there was a lot of interest in wetland banking. I think that was 2019. So it's been a few years. Since then, Pine County's been busy. It's been a very busy place for wetland work. One thing I want to do, though, before we get into it, I just want to commend the work of Pine County staff at this point. It's very difficult work oftentimes. And Caleb and his staff, including the Soil and Water Conservation District, have been doing an outstanding job. So they're running a very effective program. So I just wanted to preface all that with that. I was asked to come here today to talk about local government unit responsibilities and some of the key roles and some of the key factors in how the state Wetland Conservation Act is administered in Pine County and throughout the state. So what I wanted to do here this morning is kind of start out by talking about what a wetland is. I'm just on my way down here, I received a phone call from a landowner here in Pine County wondering about if their property has a wetland on it or not. And we talked about how not all wetlands have cattails on them. So that's something that we kind of always start and think when we walk through the presentation, you'll see why understanding the technical parts of the science behind a wetland is kind of the first step for anybody in the business. Then I want to just kind of give a real quick overview of what those regulatory programs are. There's a couple really key water and wetland regulatory programs in the state. The Minnesota Wetland Conservation Act being one of them. That's administered through the local government units. So the real meat of this presentation hopefully is really talking about those local government units and their duties, because there are a fair amount of them. The administration of the rule is done locally, and who and what and all the moving parts in those roles and who does what at different times during the administration of the rule. There's this, one of the big strengths of the Wetland Conservation Act is this technical evaluation panel, or TEP. And in that panel, there are a number of pretty key roles that I want to run through with you guys. And then just a real quick overview, a single slide showing kind of how enforcement procedures play out. Because unfortunately, it's part of the business that violations happen and enforcement procedures are invoked. And the TEP and the LGU, the local government unit, work with landowners on finding resolution. So the other hat that I wear for the agency is through the Minnesota Wetland Professional Certification Program. And we spend our time training and certifying wetland professionals from both angles, the private sector consultants and staff, whether it be at the local, state, or federal levels. And the big key, the big takeaway, no matter what folks learn in their certification process, is that we always do science first and then follow it up with policy. So it's every technical decision should be rooted in your scientific findings, your technical findings. And that's very critical, because if you try to fit the policy into the science, it doesn't work. And that's where folks run afoul with the rules. So just want to stress that here, that no matter who we're talking to, and really one way to understand the administration of the Wetland Conservation Act and a lot of other natural resource regulatory programs is that it's rooted in science. You always do the science first and then do the policy. So with that, there is an actual technical definition of what a wetland is. And in this definition, I just want to point out a couple of things. One, you'll see that the definition itself has what we call the three parameters of wetland: hydrology, vegetation, and soil. So that in that definition, it all starts with the hydrology, right? Hydrology is that driving force of wetland. And wetlands can have multiple hydrology regimes, right? It can be ponded or flooded or inundated, or it can be saturated, right? The groundwater is just below the water table or below the ground surface. The definition also includes that there's a timing element, a frequency and duration, and then this concept of normal circumstances. So easiest way to think about normal circumstances is that that's just the long-term condition. That's the long-term condition that the hydrology and the soils on the site are at or have been at. Past then that you can see that the two other parameters, vegetation and soil, are kind of in response to the hydrology, right? This hydrology has saturated soils, which the plants have adapted to. And then wetland has to have that dominance of that vegetation, or what we call hydrophytes, those plants that have adapted to life in saturated conditions. So it all kind of starts there. So when we're talking about the science, it's all rooted based in this and can be really encapsulated in this definition itself. So again, those three parameters are the hydrology, the soil, and the vegetation. And a lot of what we do, a lot of the vast majority of the field work that we do, like including the field work we're going to be going to do this afternoon here in Pine County, is looking at whether this site meets these three criteria. So that was the science. That was the technical stuff. And of course, I could have talked all week about those three parameters in itself. But for now, I think for your purposes of being the board of commissioners for Pine County, what you need to know is that there's this regulatory component to it, that the day-to-day work is being done by your staff. So there's a couple of really key regulatory programs that I think you guys are probably aware of here. The Public Waters Permit Program is administered through the DNR. I'll show you a map view of what that might look like, of where that jurisdiction lies. The Wetland Conservation Act is what we'll focus on here today. Again, that is administered as a state rule that's administered locally. And then we have the federal water, Section 404, the Clean Water Act, and that's administered by the Army Corps of Engineers. There's a couple different layers there. And this is how it all kind of shakes out on actual site. The one on the left there, I want to just point out a couple things in cross section. Notice how in the middle there, you have the public waters. And in this case, maybe it's even public waters with a wetland in it too. Well, that jurisdiction is under the DNR's Public Waters Permit Program. Now notice the Corps, I'm going to point over on this screen, the Corps still has jurisdiction over that as well as going out from there. But the key here is that any of those public waters, which include basically every named lake in the state, including the mini lakes in Pine County, is that there is a set elevation right there called the ordinary high water line. And that's an actual elevation, defined elevation in most cases, not always. But that is where the DNR's has jurisdiction. Landward of that though, so landward of that ordinary high water line is the wetland. And that is where the Minnesota Wetland Conservation Act has jurisdiction, kicks in. And that is where, starting at that ordinary high water line, going landward till that boundary where you start to get out of those three parameters, that is where the Wetland Conservation Act has jurisdiction. Mr. Chair.
Can we ask questions?
Absolutely, yeah.
The public waters, I understand, you know, the federal Corps has some, but I've a pond, stock pond or a wildlife pond that is dug on somebody's place on my farm.
Yep.
If I want to modify that, does the Corps have, because it used to be grass and now it's, there is some open water in there, does it then become a public open water?
The jurisdictional boundary of the Army Corps of Engineers Clean Water Act is defined by what's called the waters of the U.S., WOTUS. You've probably heard it in the news. It seems to change with every administration, right? So with that, there typically has to, generally speaking, there has to be some nexus. So some adjacency, some connection to waters of the U.S. to call, in your case, a pond, which is probably technically a wetland. For the Corps to take jurisdiction over that, there'd have to be some kind of nexus based off of the current WOTUS, the current waters of the U.S. definition. But what would be under that, the jurisdiction of that would probably be the Wetland Conservation Act, right? Because that would be defined.
I understand that part, but.
Yep. And that is, you know, I think we all have to acknowledge that WOTUS has kind of been a moving target, right? And that's one thing that is, I think something to commend Minnesota about is that we have two regulatory programs that work side by side, tandem, for two different aquatic resources at the state level. You know, we have the DNR's Public Waters Program, which is defined by the ordinary high line. And then going back into the wetlands, we have the WACA, the Wetland Conservation Act, that also has a jurisdictional boundary that's defensible and that's defined as well.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So if I dig a hole, when does it become a wetland? Like if I'm a farmer and I just want to water my animal, how long does that take?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Ludwig, that's a very good question. If you dig a hole, so there's two parts to that answer, I should say. There's the regulatory side of whether or not that activity is regulated, right? And the short answer is if you dig that pond in an upland area and it becomes a wetland, it's actually out of the scope of the Wetland Conservation Act. It's what we call an incidental wetland. It's a wetland that was dug in a non-wetland area, not for the purpose of creating a wetland. It was the purpose of creating a stock pond. So when it actually becomes a wetland itself, if you dig into that water table and you bring the hydrology, the area will respond very quickly. What you will see, depending on the soil type in the existing plant community, is that you'll see the soil basically respond immediately. And within, I would probably say, a couple growing seasons, you'll have seen the soil start to develop some characteristics that we use to determine whether or not it's wetland soil. And then you also see the prevalence of the change in the plant community, probably within a couple growing seasons, in fact, maybe even sooner than that.
Okay, so so if I'm a person, I want to dig a pond.
Yep.
For whatever reason, to look at it or whatever.
Mhm.
Then it becomes a wetland, and 5 years later I say, I don't want that pond anymore, I want to fill it in. Can't do it?
It kind of goes back into that first scope question.
One of the 3 criteria?
Yeah, and or if whether or not it was an incidental wetland to begin with.
Okay.
More often, we find people dig that pond and actually then want to increase the size of it. But yes, there are some situations where if you just dug that pond in an upland area, it's considered an incidental wetland. It's therefore out of the scope of the Wetland Conservation Act. It's not regulated within the act, so you could go and fill it back in theory.
Okay.
So the point of, I guess, of these slides is whether you're looking at cross-section or map view like the one on the right, is that one, these 3 programs are at play, right? Typically speaking, especially the one where it's a public water, the Corps has jurisdiction. The Corps then has jurisdiction over the wetland. But the state, through the DNR's program and the Wetland Conservation Act that Caleb and his crew are working on, also have the wetland areas that they're wondering about and helping folks figure out projects in there. So just let's kind of focus then on the Wetland Conservation Act. So of course, that's what you guys are concerned about here. So this is a state law passed in '91. This was actually a bipartisan bill that was during the Purpose era. It's not a standalone statute. Instead, it's kind of peppered throughout 103A, B, E, and F and G. And it's been codified in Minnesota Rule, Chapter 8420. And that's the rule book that we use, governments use to then go and use as the playbook, essentially, for regulating wetlands. Oh, sorry, all these animations didn't know that they were that way. Okay. So again, just quick overview of what that means. The Wetland Conservation Act regulates the draining, filling, and then some excavation, that's type dependent. Administered again by the local government units. In some areas, you will have the Soil Water Conservation District will be delegated authority to administer it. And then in the metro area in particular, but other places in the state, watershed districts. The Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources, or BOWSR, the agency that I work for, has oversight of the Wetland Conservation Act. And we'll talk a little bit more about that role. Again, there's its authorities, the underlying statutes. The jurisdictional boundary are based on those 3 parameters that are in the 1987 Corps manual, but also regional supplements. And it kind of has these ideas of these standards where we first try to avoid impacts and then we try to minimize them. If we can't minimize them, then we replace them. It's not a jump to C. It's a go through these steps. The enforcement authority is the DNR. And this is a key part, especially when we're talking about enforcement or violations, is that the conservation officers or the water resource officers have the enforcement authority. They are the badge. They're the ones who are actually issuing the orders that are being recommended by the TAP or the LGU, that panel, the LGU. And anytime you want to do an activity in wetlands, we use this joint application form. And that joint part of it is because the application goes both to the state or the LGU as well as the Corps. So it's one application for both programs.
Yeah.
So just on the back on you regulate the draining, filling and some excavation. So let's say someone buys a piece of property in Pine County, wild chunk, and they come up, I want to punch a driveway in, they go through a swamp or whatever. And you get that automatic, whatever you could,
De minimis.
amount of wetlands you can fill or whatever with putting your driveway in or whatever. What do you call that?
Sure, it's called de minimis.
Yeah, de minimis.
Yeah.
So how do they know how much de minimis they have when they buy the property?
It's a good question. They probably won't know the answer to that right away. What they should do is contact Caleb and the staff and ask for kind of a determination of what that de minimis amount might be. The reason why is because there are three main variables that determine what a de minimis is on a property. There's the proximity to shoreline. So the closer you are to the lake, the less de minimis you have. There's the type of wetlands. Some wetlands just inherently have a little bit more higher value because of the functions that they play. So there's a lower de minimis for that. And then the other part of that is where you are in the state. So if you're in the north, where we have a lot of our pre-statehood wetlands, we have higher de minimis thresholds just by default versus down the south where, a lot of the wetlands have been drained, they have a lower de minimis.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the scope is, like I said, that draining, filling, and excavation. But notice that excavation part is type dependent. So if your activity, if your excavation drains, fills, or converts wetlands to non-wetlands because of your excavation. So think about it this way. If you dig so far down that you're not even a wetland, you make a deep water pond or deep water habitat, you've just converted that wetland to a non-wetland. The same is true as if you excavate and then you side cast and dump the spoils and fill and convert that wetland into an upland, you've just converted that wetland. So excavation is kind of one of those, mind what you're doing, know where you're putting those spoils, know how deep you're digging. But for a type 3, 4, 5, those are the open water, the marsh wetlands. So think cattails in that case. That excavation is typically always regulated. So this picture actually shows all types of impacts. This area right here was a marsh, right? And the landowner drained it. You can see the excavator in the very back there. And then they went and started digging into the marsh and then filling into this road here that they're trying to build. So you had both draining, filling, and then excavation, not only in a type 3, 4, 5, but the excavation converted this area, which was a wetland, into an upland. So it kind of depends on a couple different variables. That's why a lot of the takeaways that when we're talking with an individual landowner is to talk to the LG, talk to Caleb and his staff, because that is the single biggest, best piece of information that we can get a landowner before they decide to work in wetlands. So I think the other thing too for commissioners to understand and to really note is who's doing what. We talked about these different layers of regulatory programs, but there are some really key roles that I think are useful to understand in the actual implementation of the Wetland Conservation Act. The first big one is the LGU, the local government unit. That's your county staff. They're the ones who are actually making those decisions and leading or coordinating that technical evaluation panel or TEP. The SWCD, it's not on the chart there, but very important. They're on the list because they serve on that panel. When enforcement procedures are invoked, they're actually the ones writing the restoration plans and the orders that the DNR is then serving. Bowser's, my agency, we have oversight authority. So we do the rulemaking. Right now, we're currently in rulemaking right now. We also serve on the TEP. We hear appeals, minister the bank. A lot of our role is to simply oversee and train LGUs. The big overarching role of Bowser on the ground is actually kind of that consistency part of it. I work in a region. At one point, I covered nearly a fifth of the state and area. I got to see a lot of LGUs and how they approached it. We all work, we cover the entire state collectively. Our role is to make sure that we're being consistent from one region to one LGU at a time. So that's a pretty important role. The DNR with that enforcement authority. So they're the ones actually serving the orders. They're working, they're coordinating, they're collaborating, working in tandem and communicating with TEP and the LGU on the enforcement process. So LGUs, Caleb and crew have a ton of duties. Every LGU in the state does. And this isn't even the only slide that lists out their duties. The big ones here, besides the making decisions, is the providing the staff. That's kind of what you guys were doing. You guys were just going through that HR agenda item. And again, the program here locally is being run very effectively. And the reason why it's being run effectively is, well, one, the staff themselves, but also two, they've taken the time to gain the experience and to train themselves. And that's exceptionally important because a lot of the decisions, a lot of the recommendations, like I started off with talking about, are very technical in nature. So they have the background, they have the experience, and they have the training to do what they're doing. That's very important. You guys have also, I believe it was 2018 where your most recent resolutions have placed that decision authority with staff. And again, I find there's a lot of value in that because they're the experts. They're the subject matter experts. They're the technically trained experts with that background and experience to go make those technical decisions. And you guys have wisely placed that decision authority on them. Pine County is really good at using TEP. They don't use TEP for every single thing that's out there. They could cover a lot for themselves, but they've made really good decisions on when to pull TEP in. And that usually is when it's either complex or controversial or a violation or something like that. The project is difficult in nature, so they call a panel in to talk it through. Again, I told you that's not the only thing because LGUs even have more than this. So they're going to be working hand in hand with that landowner. They're going to be talking with that landowner, making those kinds of determinations that you were just asking about, and really kind of trying to lay out, okay, here's the findings, here's the technical information, here's how that fits in their rule. They also have a lot of those administrative roles too. They're maintaining records. You guys have a fee schedule that includes some application types for wetland work. And then every year they submit an annual report to the state. So kind of here, just digging a little bit more kind of into the real details of TEP, because I started out by saying that this is one of the biggest strengths of the rule. I think the two biggest strengths of the Wetland Conservation Act is one, it's administered locally. So it's got that local knowledge. But two, then it has this panel. And, you know, the many minds, you know, working together, that is definitely an advantage that this TEP has versus just one person over there scratching their head. So again, we have our LGU, we have Bowser, we have SWCD, and we have the DNR. The DNR actually on TEP is an official member when you're in shoreline. Remember how they got the interest for the public waters permit program. But their big role is to advise the LGU. Some decisions depend directly on what TEP is recommending or telling you what they think. Some aren't. Some are just, the LGU could just ask, hey guys, what do you think? Sometimes the LGU is required to ask the TEP what they think. The TEPs, though, is, and again, very appropriately used here in Pine County, is often there to directly advise landowners and applicants. Whether it's, hey, do you think I qualify for de minimis? Or some of the projects that we go look at, like we're going to be looking at this afternoon, it's potentially a large project that might be in the hopper. There's no application, but we're doing a consultation beforehand to try to sort out some of the complexities before they actually apply for it. So hopefully the actual permitting process is a little bit more efficient. So again, really important role in the whole process. I'm just going to throw this up there. I think you guys can read the steps. But what I want you to just kind of keep in mind is that there's this balance between we're not elected members, we're not elected officials, right? So it's not subject to open meeting law. It's relatively informal in that sense, but there is advantages to having a relatively formal meeting and have a reason for TEP. We're bringing a bunch of different public employees. We're spending taxpayer dollars to do this. So we do recommend that you always kind of have a formal agenda. In that, then, remember, we got multiple people. Just say this picture alone, there's 4 people there trying to figure out what's going on. They're trying to have that open discussion, but there's not always going to be a lockstep and barrel the whole time, right? So there will be disagreements. That's something that we spend some time trying to figure out, trying to find that common ground. But in the end, TEP should be making those findings, should be trying to stick to the science, trying to make recommendations on how the policy part could shake out. Last thing I wanted to just highlight for you guys here today is enforcement procedures. Like I said in the opening, enforcements happen, violations happen. They're never fun. There's never a fun violation for anybody involved. The key with violations, though, is that there is a very, not strict, but there is a set procedure. And the thing about the procedure is that the further along you get in the procedure, the more defined it takes, the more defined course it takes, the less options there are. So from that activity being detected, just note that there's a couple roles that you see there playing out. And notice how the DNR CO and the SWCD have the big roles. They're the ones listed on that flow chart. So at the end of the day, the SWCD is working with TEP to make recommendations to what orders, the nature of the orders being issued by the DNR. So just wanted to point that out because again, they happened. It's something that TEPs and LGUs struggle with, but when it comes down to it, there actually is a relatively prescribed procedure to enforcement. So that's what I have for you guys in terms of presentation. Each of those slides we could have discussed for a day, and I know that's not why you're here today. And I did my best to hold myself, contain myself. But I want to just kind of make these couple final points. That one, it's rooted in science. There are technical calls that go into this. The folks doing the on the ground work are technically trained, experienced, and have the education to be doing this work. That there's multiple water, wetland regulatory programs in the state, all work in pretty decently close coordination too. Pine County has that super important role of administering the State Wetland Conservation Act here. That the TEP, or the Technical Evaluation Panel, plays that role in WACA implementation. And then again, we have a relatively defined enforcement procedure when things do go astray. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you folks might have.
Questions? Comments? Yeah, I got most of mine. I appreciate it. Yeah, I know it's a head scratcher for a lot of my neighbors. They're trying to do the right thing for the most part, and they don't know if they could open that ditch up that was dug there in 1910.
Yep.
You know, I always don't get a hold of. Don't ask me, you know.
Yeah.
But our area was settled with, and everybody thought every slough was flat for one thing. And if we just put a ditch in there, got all that black soil, we can farm that. And so apparently it didn't work very well because a lot of those ditches are there and the swamp is still there.
Yeah.
So
Mr. Chair, your first point, talk to staff, is absolutely spot on. That's the best thing to do. And also most of northern Minnesota is showing the same page in terms of the effectiveness of the ditches. It's tough. The thing is, though, is that the State Wetland Conservation Act does have provisions in forms of exemptions for ditch maintenance. So if people are trying to figure out what can I maintain, especially when we're talking about ditches, talk to Caleb, talk to Jeremy. These guys know how to kind of the big variables that they have to consider to figure out, can that maintenance happen?
we only have about, what, half a dozen judicial ditches. We've abandoned several of them, but there's a lot of private ditches that were dug by the original homesteaders, I believe. Most of them were dug by hand, from what I understand. And some were effective and some weren't. But I don't know. It's always a challenge, I think.
Mr.
Yeah.
Mr. Demmer, you said you provide training. One of the other hats you wear. Where do you train, or what do you?
Good question, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Walden. So the Minnesota Wetland Professional Certification Program, we train it all over the state.
The Minnesota
The Minnesota Wetland Professional Certification Program, MWPCP.
board.
Yeah, another acronym for you. There you go. So we train all over the state. Last week I was in Arden Hills doing the basic class. We do one up in Brainerd, a 5-day basic class that I believe Jeremy did the last one there too in Arden Hills last year. But other than that, we do a whole variety. We do what we call intermediate level training through regional trainings. Those are typically 2-day trainings where we literally have our, 8 locations in the 8 major regions of the state in the metro area, where we go all around and we do 2 days of training. The first day is usually very technical, and the second day is a regulatory training. Sometimes we flip that out around, but we train. Then in those trainings are people, whether you're local government units or a lot of the private consultants have this certification program, so they have to keep up their certification through it. So they are often in attendance. And then on the public sector, we train people from all over, from local government units all the way up to federal officials. So short answer is we train everywhere in the state. We have people actually coming in from all over the region. Last week, we had a couple from Texas coming up to get our wetland training. So we try to keep it, the big thing about our program is that we try to keep it affordable, relevant, and regional. So for commissioners or local government units who are who are required to have trained and knowledgeable staff, we hope that that's a good avenue to get that you can just bop up. We have one in Cloquet in August. So have some Pine County staff drive up there. I don't remember if you guys are registered for it or not, but have them bop up to Cloquet and take a regional, Northeast specific regional training where the topics are hopefully regionalized, so relevant to those people.
And you said it was Jeremy, was it your Jeremy that went to it? You mentioned his name.
Yeah, Jeremy Williamson did I think that was last year's 5-day, the basic class that we taught in Arden Hills. And he is certified. I can't remember what level he is certified, but yes. But, between Caleb and Jeremy and, Zach at the SWCD, you guys have really good staff actually out there doing the groundwork. So, and yeah, they're trained. They know what they're doing.
Minnesota Wetland Protection
Professional Certification Program.
Certification. Thank you.
Welcome. You could find my contact information anywhere, online. And if not, Caleb and crew know how to get hold of me too. But in the meanwhile, though, I do certainly appreciate this opportunity, Chair.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Welcome.
As you know, we got a ton of wetlands in Pine County.
We'll go digging some right now.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Next, we have the Sandstone Township request to replace culvert under Township Road.
Morning.
Morning.
Hey,
Those of you that don't know me, I'm Gary Hitch with Sandstone Township, supervisor, working the roads. In October of last year, 2021, a grader operator contacted me and told me that saw something on a culvert I should have take a look at. So I did. And whoa, those are 2 awfully big culverts, and between them, they're starting to just kind of erode between the culverts, that shoulder material stuff. So I've been babysitting that thing ever since. It was dry enough last year where I got up inside both the culverts. These are large culverts, 48 to 52 inches in diameter. One of them is an old steel culvert, and it approximately maybe 38 feet long. The other one is a 30-footer, and that's a corrugated galvanized. That one is on the north side, and well, both of them actually. The road has grown, the brush has grown, life has gone on. And that 30-footer, you can't see it from either end. It's a small culvert, but it's big around, but it's very, very short. So I wasn't too serious looking at the time, but come later into the fall, I put a flag out there to keep people off of that shoulder because it was kind of eroding into the road, And so anyways, long story short, I've been nurturing this thing along. It's growing. It's like a piece of pie. You cut a piece of pie out into my shoulder of that road, and the material is just disappearing. It's going down underneath. And it's getting bigger. And so all the while I'm doing all this and taking care of it, I'm thinking to myself, my goodness, if we have a 2016, like we did down in Berry Township, Deer Creek there, this can be a dangerous thing. And so through the summer this year, I've got a lot of flags to keep people off of that shoulder. And it's getting worse. It's gradually eating out, it's not in the road surface yet, but it's eroding. And every time I look at it, it seems like it's gone another inch or so, and I've had to move the one flag out again. So thing is something needs to be done. Done some research and stuff, and you're the water authority. Okay, Pine County is the water authority for that ditch, the Friesland ditch. And by the way, Friesland ditch crosses under two more of my roads. Nurses Road goes underneath that. And one more that's somewhat problematic, but not near as serious as this one, is the one down by Matt's house there on Government Road where it comes out on Nurses. And those pipes are a little bit smaller. I've been babysitting those for a long time. So I guess I'm here to ask you a question. Why, or if you have questions, ask me, but why, is there any way we can get some help on this? We're a small township. We don't have the money to put the material on our roads as it is. We budget like crazy. We're tight and we still can't get enough material on our roads. Now this comes up, but it is a county ditch, leaving the county responsible for that. And so I guess what I want to know is what can we do? What can you do? No.
Well, Aaron is here from the engineer's office. I don't know if you've got an answer.
Yeah, should I approach?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
So, Mr. Chair, so I'm Aaron Gunderson, Assistant County Engineer at the Highway Department, and we've spoke.
Yeah.
And I'm here for Mark LeBrun, who wasn't able to make it today. So what Mark informed me is that we haven't replaced culverts unless on township roads. It's the township's legal responsibility to own and maintain the road. They've got the order to maintain it. And so the county doesn't replace culverts as long as that judicial ditch is functioning the way it should. As long as the water is able to pass, that's the county's responsibility. The township's responsibility is to own and maintain the road. This particular road, I have looked at it.
Yeah.
And it is a steep drop off. You're right. This particular road appears to be getting wider over time. The culvert would be wide enough if the road didn't continue to get wider over time. The ditches are short and steep, and the top of the gravel surface is wider than necessary. And if we're not careful on our county roads, gravel roads tend to do that. As you blade a road, it tends to get wider, and you've got to go through periodically and pull the ditches in. Otherwise, your road will become wider and wider, and your culverts over time will be too short, and you'll have a steep drop off. So it's just my opinion that looks to be the case of what's happening on this county road. And so it's not the condition of the culvert or really even the length of the culvert. It is the fact that the culvert doesn't have end sections, which they typically do, so that the end matches the ditch slope. It's just a vertical drop. So it's the fact that it doesn't have end sections and that the road appears to be getting wider over time. When I crawl in the culvert and look at it, it's still actually in good condition and it still flows the water like it should. And we haven't done it in the past where we've a situation like this where a working culvert where we've replaced it on a county road. So that's what I know.
Well, this one here is a township road.
Township road.
I'm sorry, I meant to say a township road. Yep.
Roads have grown, and the reason they've grown, all roads have. Our roads, I don't know about the county roads, but actually they've grown some too. The thing is, you talk about reclaiming the gravel, and this is the one, this is a big bad feeling I have. I want to reclaim gravel so bad, but I can't get into my ditches to do it. They're so full of utilities, you know? And the last one to come through the government road 2 years ago, I was fiber optics from SCI, I believe it was. They called me up and he says, we're coming up the government road. And I said, well, they're 33 feet of right of way. You got the last foot. You better bring a brusher. And they did. They actually did it. They brushed the woods on everything. And yeah, that's 33 feet in. They got the last foot. There's no other room. Worst one of all is even the forest slope where you'd really like to get in, you know, you can't. You can't get down it because you got phone lines. You got phone pedestals down in the ditches. You got it tipped over. Phone lines are so neglected. Kind of looking at now, I talked to Minnesota Power last summer about before anybody puts in, because they're talking about putting in some new lines on a couple, I think down on Friesland or something like that. And I said, well, before you put those lines in, what are you going to do with the abandoned lines? They need to come out. And he just laughed at me. He said, are you crazy? And well, you know, that's a big expense for them, you know, but you got to do something. I've been begging for help here. I don't know who to, I've talked to a lot of supervisors and stuff through the years. It's a big conversation. All of our road work is there's so much junk in our ditches. We can't reclaim that gravel. I did an LTAC course 2 years ago talking about roads construction, maintenance, gravel and stuff. And put up a picture on a big lit up screen. On that picture, the ditch. And this is, how much is that ditch worth? And the answer was when the teacher started talking, the answer was like thousands and thousands of dollars because of all the material tax dollars staying in that ditch. You got to reclaim them, and we're trying to, but I just don't know what we can do. Yeah, that's an issue. That our ditches, they got to be kept clean, and you know, there's so much utility in there. I don't know. But that's not the problem. Go ahead.
So just a comment there, and this is my last comment, Mr. Chair. So the Minnesota statute requires right-of-way owners to work with utility companies. It doesn't behoove us to put the utility in a certain location. So it's the road owner's legal responsibility to be over the install, which is hard for townships, I understand. But to manage the installation of the utility such that it's at the back of the right of way to prevent issues like this from happening. However, there also is a process through state law, and it's enforced by the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission, where if you need to do work, you provide them a notice. There's a utility coordination process.
Sure.
You tell them to move and they have to move. So they don't own the right of way.
No.
They're a guest in your right of way.
Absolutely.
And they have to move so that you can maintain your road.
That's what he said.
It would be unsustainable for a county highway department or for a township department or state or anyone to be held by the utility companies. We would have to be widening our roads rather than pulling them in. And no one has enough money to do that. So it's my opinion that this is a case where if a utility company is preventing you from doing work, you've got to go through the process and tell them to relocate so that you guys can do them.
Yeah.
Comments. One, if commissioners aren't familiar with this and want any photos, Ryan does have some photos that he can project. So just let him know he can do that if you desire that. And secondly, the formal request from Sandstone Township does make some legal assertions. And so I'm wondering if the county attorney can weigh in at some point as to what that may or may not mean. And so I don't know if I saw Terry give a thumbs up on the photo if she wants those projected to kind of get an idea. And I don't know if Gary or Aaron can maybe explain what we're looking at to help commissioners understand. Yeah, so this is just the road.
See the flags there.
And then there's a couple that show the culverts.
We got pictures down, you can see down in, there's the old steel culvert there. That's one looking down, looking to the east on your right-hand side. And the erosion is eating it. That's your shoulder looking at right there. And you can see it a little bit better. I've had to move that one flag out. There's two sitting one behind the other. The one in the front is the one that I put in there last October. And then through the winter, I had it on snowbanks. Now this spring, I moved it out a foot. So it's gradually eroding. And it's eroding from underneath. I don't know where all the material is going. It's not so much about culverts and all that. It's about, it presents a dangerous situation. It's not my culverts that are doing it. It's not our culverts. I don't know what to tell you, but it's going to continue to grow. Every time I hear thunder, I cringe. Oh my gosh. I need to be running down there. I can't tell you how many trips I've taken down there.
I think the basic premise that I understand is Sandstone Township wants the county to repair that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're saying we're not the road authority on that township road.
It's not about road authority. It's about you are the water authority.
Yeah.
That's your water, your ditch.
Is a county ditch. I think Reese has some information about what he dug up through which differs a little bit from what I believe Gussie found.
Yeah, we got all kinds of it. We got stacks of it, but I don't want to get in the case.
Yeah.
I'm not an attorney, Reese, you know that.
If I can, sure.
Yeah.
And I guess I have a different opinion on it if I can. I mean, to me, it just seems, and then there's the interstate is between Doopy Road and Nurses, right? So the ditch runs under I-35 also? Yes, which is.
No. It starts, I don't know where Friesland Road starts. You look at the map and it curls the cues all the way around. Okay, so Doopy runs parallel, yeah, it's on the other side, west of the interstate.
Like,
Yeah.
this is on east I-35 and that's on west. Does the water run under I-35?
Yeah. Yeah, because it goes west to east at Doopy, then it goes a little ways. I don't know where it goes under the interstate. It's got to be shortly after, because I can hear cars when I'm down on Doopy. It's right next to it.
I worked on both, and yeah, you're right. There's a lot of problems with all these utilities and the ditches, and it's
really hard.
You know, I mean, you just can't go around and bury stuff around the county anymore, and it's regulated, and a lot of it is even the materials and everything else can be considered a whole other subject. But I guess what I'm getting at is it's a unique situation. Sounds like it's a money situation.
Big time.
It is stormwater. I know there has been, and there is a provision in ARPA for stormwater and dealing with stormwater. Would there be a possibility to help out with any ARPA? I mean, it boils down to money. I mean, it is the county ditch. I think, is there some things we can agree on? It is a county ditch?
It is a county ditch, but
And then
in other townships, we just replaced one in Pine City Township not very long ago on County Road or County Ditch 3, I believe. And they did it under that township thing where the township is capped at how much money they have to pay. And then the Minnesota State, is it the bridge fund or whatever? Town Bridge Fund took care of the rest. So there's a cap to the townships. That's what we've done in other cases.
So this is, but I mean, as far as we have very little funding.
Yeah.
We used to get more funding a couple of years back and that went somewhere else. I won't say anymore. But so with that lack of funding, it makes it harder and harder for us to run our township. We went to a quarterly budget 2 years ago, so we could keep better tabs on everything. And as a supervisor and you're working on roads, you got to know exactly, almost to the penny, how much money I can spend on aggregate to resurface my roads. And it can't do it. You just can't, we don't have the money. And now this year with the fuel and everything else, it's gone totally insane. And so I look at a project, this was told to me by a couple of different people that it's about a $20,000 project. I look at that for my township and I'm like, oh yeah, right. Sure, it's $20,000. We can just, no problem. No, that's a major problem for us, major problem. You all should really pay attention and know that because it's a fact. I'm not standing up here just spreading it. You see some pictures. I got more pictures. I got movies. We all got movies and pictures of it. I don't care what's going to happen. If that isn't taken care of, it's going to continue to erode out. Okay. And just say we haven't even had much rain. It's been a dry summer so far. But what if we get into like a 2016, that will take that road out. It'll shut it down and some people, I'm surprised nobody got really seriously injured down in Deer Creek there on Berry Township here a couple of years back. It was 2016. That was a big mishap. That was terrible and frightening, you know. And so this isn't going to be the same because of the height and all that, but it's still, that road will come out so easy, you know. It's, I don't know how, the pipe should be pulled out of there and replaced. Very simple with aprons.
I understand what you're saying. I think the problem is we've got 700 miles of county roads to take care of. And so the township then has a process that they get money to fix roads. And, you know, it comes from gas tax, it comes from tax levy, and the same way the county does. And so that our assertion is, even though it's a county ditch, it's like the river is a state river. And, you know, when it goes over underneath one of our roads, we got to fix it. That's what we're saying. And I think that's what Reese found in his research. I don't know if you want to weigh in right now, Reese, but.
I can,
Terry,
I did. So JJ, we don't have any more ARPA money. It's all spoken for. So you had asked that question, and I guess I'll speak to that we've already spoken for that money. But Gary, we in Hinkley Township, Ronnie, whenever he did the roads, he would always pull that gravel up every year. He had a little tool that he would pull and it would bring that gravel back up into the road. And if I heard Aaron right, he was saying that with the grading that's been going on, the road has been widened because you haven't been bringing that in. Otherwise, the culverts would be fine. And if the road structure would probably be good also, is what I got out of Aaron's, if that gravel would have been brought back into the road. So I guess my question is do you ever maintain that gravel to bring it in?
We don't have the equipment to Danforth Township or Delgrove has got a reclaimer put right on the blade of the grader, right on the moldboard, and to come use it any time. But I don't know how we're going to do that. I can show you pictures of my road, Tlajeski Road, where there's flags on the shoulder.
I can tell you that when Ronnie would do that on our road, it was always amazing how much gravel every year that he would bring back in, but he did it every year to keep it maintained.
Tremendous savings if we can reclaim that gravel. That's thousands of dollars, taxpayer dollars you can save. But we're hindered because of the garbage in our ditches. I mean by garbage is utilities.
but there is a process. If you think you have it located, if there's a phone line in the shoulder of that ditch, you give notice to the phone company and they have to move it. So you can go in there and do work.
They have to supposedly, but try to get them to do it. You know, you can put in a request in spring, and it'll probably still be there the following Christmas. They don't want to do that. It costs them too much money to do that. A lot of those are abandoned lines, not even used, you know, and it's a problem for not just me, but all supervisors in all the townships. You know, we've got a big responsibility to try to, retrieve our gravel. That's a lot of money down the ditch. Not all of it is in vehicles, some of it is in grading and stuff like that. But that's why you have to reclaim your ditches, you know. But
Reese, why don't you say what you found?
Also, Mr. Chair, in reviewing the ditch authority and state law, it's under chapter 103E. The statute 103E.525 talks about maintaining bridges and culverts. Subdivision 2 states road authority responsibility, and I'll read it verbatim. Bridges and culverts on public roads required by the construction or improvement of a drainage project or system must be constructed and maintained by the road authority responsible for keeping the road in repair, except as provided in this section. Now, I know that there was a case that was submitted. It was in Red Lake Watershed Project. Had a chance to review that. what that case, the circumstances in there don't apply to the circumstances that are being talked about here. That case kind of goes from the opposite perspective of it's initiated by the watershed or the county authority, the ditch authority. So what they did was they did an assessment or they have to maintain or construct the ditch. And when they do that, they have viewers that go out and determine what are the damages along the ditch. And they determined that a culvert had to be replaced. And so what this watershed authority did was they went under the statute, and under the statute, it actually says that they can demand like a road authority to replace the culverts within a certain period of time. And if that doesn't happen, then they can go forward and do it themselves. What happened in that case was that, so these viewers went out, they looked at the road authority, or I mean, they looked at the ditch, the culverts, and then decided some damages for what they had to fix in that ditch, but they didn't include the construction costs for the culverts. And so that's what it came down to, was that the watershed was forcing the township to replace the culverts at their own cost when statute includes costs of construction. And that's why I went up to the Court of Appeals on that. Here you have a different situation where my understanding is that the culverts don't need to be replaced, or I think the engineers determined that they're not necessarily be replaced and that it's the road authority that's actually doing the work on the road. So, I mean, that's just kind of a different situation from that case.
Yeah, well, I just, a township is not running those ditches. That's the county responsibility. And it's your culverts under my road that are creating an issue. That's all I got to say.
And we're listening to.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I mean, the county engineer office will certainly work with the township. Advising and that kind of stuff. But the ditch itself, if you remember how ditch laws work, the county may order work done on a ditch, but the county levy dollars don't pay for that. It's the determination that was made by the ditch viewers originally. For everybody that benefits from that ditch, that's who pays for it. So if that makes sense. You know, it doesn't come out of the county road budget to fix a ditch or something. It comes from the fund. I don't know what ditch number that is, Friesland Ditch. The Friesland Ditch Fund pays for any repairs to the Friesland Ditch.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So Gary, how did those culverts perform in 2012 flood? And how did they perform in the that didn't wash out, did it?
No, it didn't, but the road was a lot better than two. I would say, I don't see that. Oh, in 2012. I was even. I was working with the township. I wasn't a supervisor.
That was the big one.
I kept telling them no.
That did not wash out.
No, we would have known about it. The road would have been gone. So, yeah.
We have had several complaints about water this spring from residents in that area about water backing up into their yards and stuff. We did have several complaints.
Did it go over the road?
Pardon?
Did the water go over the road?
I don't know that it went over the road. I don't know that because I don't live down there and I don't oversee those roads. This spring when it was wet, did the water go over the road, Jerry?
I never heard anything.
We had complaints of people saying it was, but I don't know that it actually did. It was
People. A lot on the road.
Sure, Terry can hear this conversation.
We had 2 points of water on,
Are you hearing this, Terry?
We got,
If we're gonna talk, we got somebody.
Can you tell me who's talking though?
Oh,
I can hear.
I'm
Sorry.
Supervisor on Sandstone Township. Sorry.
Thank you, Gary. Yeah, thanks.
So where are we at, folks?
Mr. Chair, I'll
Yeah.
speak. If we have a procedure that we're already following, if we have a process, I don't think that we can go from that because we have a township that doesn't have the funds. When we have other townships that have been in that same situation that may or may not have had the funds, I just, I don't think that that's something that we can just change on a whim.
I didn't hear all of it.
I didn't quite either, but
Mr. Chair, Terry, you're hard to hear from your microphone, but I think I understood what Terry was saying is if we have a procedure, we should follow the procedure. But the lack of funds that Sandstone Township has is very similar to virtually every township in the county, that there's a lack of funds to do all of the road maintenance or other projects that are needed.
Right. Yep. And when something spontaneously comes up like this and you're not prepared for it, I know that it's a hardship, but I have a hard time changing. If we just did the same process with Pine Town, I don't think that we can change that for somebody else.
Yeah.
Due to finances. That's where I'm at. I'm sorry.
Aaron, you guys have kind of committed to, if you need some technical expertise, you'll help them. Is that what I understood?
yeah, Mr. Chair, we have been in contact and I've made a few different suggestions about the town bridge fund. I've also suggested just putting up a township does have authority to set a speed limit reduction and road narrows, do things like that to make it safe while you can maybe look at passing a levy or something like that in the meantime. The reason that the county highway department just needs to follow the established law is this would be a good example. Right after that township road, it goes under I-35. If MnDOT were to come to us and say, our road is falling in and we need you to replace that passage under I-35, there's no way that a county would be able to do something like that. And I think that's why processes are set up the way they are. And I feel for you and we'll do whatever we can to help you, but I think that our position is monetarily completely your responsibility, but I'll help with expertise or anything.
I have a question too.
Can you?
It's Gussie Crook from Sandstone Township Clerk. I did speak with MnDOT. MnDOT said we don't have the right to put speed signs on it. How would that work, Aaron? We don't have the right to, it's at 55 miles an hour.
State statute allows townships and towns to modify speed limits if it's properly voted on. And I can point you to the statutes for that.
Oh, okay. That would be good. Thank you.
They don't let us do it. The county can't.
Yeah, they wouldn't let us.
Certain small municipalities in certain situations.
So if it's an emergency or a troubled area.
Yep, and it would be a yellow sign with black lettering. You can do that.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Aaron, and thanks for coming, folks. It's always interesting. But I think we will pass on any help at this point, the way it sounds to me. We'll move on to second quarter budget report.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I've got 5 slides that Ryan will project up on the screen as I make some comments, and please feel free to ask questions at any point if you have any. So we're halfway through the year. Generally, things look as they should, right? I mean, we haven't had any unexpected expenditures that we haven't been able to accommodate. This first chart simply shows by fund, the general fund, the highway fund, the health and human services fund, and then overall. Revenues are about where we expect them, and spending is about where we expect it. So varies a little bit by fund. Highway at this point of the year still shows very little spending because most of the spending is for the projects that come through as the work is done over the summer. Overall, revenue looks a little high. That's because we have the American Rescue Plan Act funds that are not in the budget. So where the chart shows 58% revenue, that's 58% of the budget, and we didn't budget the ARPA revenue. And so it's just like an accounting thing. It's not like we're ahead on any of the projected revenues. Chart number 2 looks at the general fund revenue by department, and I'm thinking that should be June 30th, not March 31st. Comparing the last 3 years. And the big standouts, if you look at the assessor, there's 0 revenue shown. The bills didn't go out in time to get the payments on the assessor contracts by the end of the second quarter. And so it shows as an anomaly, but it's not a long-term problem. Those bills have gone out. And then in the planning and zoning, you can see that the revenue looks like it's really good. That's the grant funds for the One Watershed, One Plan. That's making that look a little bit skewed. Chart 3A looks at expenditures in the general fund by department. And the recorder's office looks like it's really spending, more than it should. That's spending for servers and for the tax and CAMA system. Those are from the reserve funds, the assessor technology, or excuse me, the recorder technology fund. Yeah. So it's not impacting the operating budget. Those are planned spending of reserves. And then, of course, court security continues to spend very little because we just have not had the need for in-person court security. And then on chart 3B, it's the same information as 3A, except the black line is the 3-year average. So you can see how the current year compares to the average. And then the last chart focuses on health and human services. And by the 3 major areas, income maintenance, social services, and public health, and all of those are looking about where they should. So no concerns with that. And then I don't have any charts on these, but just note that the American Rescue Plan Act, as Commissioner Lovgren pointed out, all of the funds are basically assigned or allocated. The actual spending for the first half of 2022, we've actually spent $345,000. And in 2021, we spent $360,000. So of that $5.5 million, we've actually spent about $700,000 of it, but basically all of it is allocated. And then on the sales tax, the local option sales tax for transportation, the first, through April. And these run a little bit behind. So this actually is through April 30th. It's just shy of $500,000. That's actually $2,200,000 less than the same period a year ago. And so year over year, this is probably the first time we've seen any decrease in a substantial period of any decrease. And that's $2,200. So
2,200?
2,200. So it's virtually identical to where it was. So 2,200 out of nearly $500,000.
And that's from January through April?
Yep. And this money funds the projects that have been identified. And so we have been, cash funding that pay as you go. And so that little variance isn't going to cause any disruption in the projects. If it continues, Mark will obviously evaluate the program and come back with any adjustments if he needs to.
My question, David, if you go back to the tax and CAMA system, we were putting money in this fund, knowing we were gonna have to spend it for quite some time. Now we spend it, but it all shows up in the recorder's office. It seems like we could have a fund just for those things. I don't know. But
Yes.
it's just the thing we have to explain to people, that we knew what we were doing. But now when we spend it, it looks like we don't know what we were doing.
Yeah, and there is no good way of representing planned spending of reserves. It's always going to give you an odd representation if you look at the numbers. This is the same story, different characters of the election fund, right? That Steve, you championed for a while, where it's now a separate fund. And so it doesn't skew the numbers that I present on a quarterly basis. But the same impact is still there.
Yeah. Thanks. Any questions on that? If not, I just have to, I want to mention the summary conclusion regarding County Administrator David Mickey's review, and statute requires us to provide a summary on the conclusion regarding evaluation of our administrator. And so we did meet with him in closed session, and we did give a verbal report, and the summary of it is that David Minke met or exceeded all the goals that were presented to him, and we appreciate the work that he does. And I think that's the summary of the summary. So thanks, David. Commissioner updates. Facilities was canceled. Soil and water, did they meet, JJ?
Yeah, I got the minutes if anybody wants to look at it, but it was, again, business as usual. I just zoomed in for the meeting and attended over the internet.
All right. East Central Solid Waste, our new assistant director, started on Monday, and we had our meeting on Monday. So he had about an hour's worth of work under his belt before we got there. So he has a long list of things to accomplish. And I think, Matt, you always are curious about how much room is left in that facility. I think we all are concerned and should be concerned. And so it's kind of a moving target because of the amount of stuff that gets put in there. So I think one of the changes we're going to see in the next year or two is probably the demolition stuff that we allow to go in the landfill, that we're going to really clamp down on the amount of demolition that we allow to go to transfer stations, which ultimately ends up in the landfill. And so we have a private demolition landfill in Rush City, and we have one on site at the landfill. If we do, the problem comes is, and I understand contractors want to turn those trucks around as fast as possible. We don't have a way to transport stuff from a transfer station in Hinkley or Cambridge that's efficient, any more efficient than a private contractor is. We don't have the manpower to do it. And so I think that's going to be the big change. I think, we had a private individual that attempted to put a demolition landfill in Pine County outside of Finlayson, and it failed, but we need something in Pine County. I really believe that.
Do we have a county prop that would work? We've never looked at
I
that.
think the land department better start looking. I just, we're gonna continue to demo buildings. We know that.
Yes, we always will.
And we need a spot that's handy for contractors to get in and out of so they can dump those roll-offs quick and get back to work. But landfilling, that's to build a new cell, put in a household solid waste facility and fill it half full of demo doesn't make any sense.
So can I have a?
Yep.
So I know it costs a ton of money to build the
Yep.
pit or whatever you call it, your site. How did you fund that? Do you fund it just on fees and have a loan out there then? Or
We fund
does
it.
each county have to
Fund it. We fund, for the most part, all our construction with money that we have set aside for expansion.
Oh, so you, okay.
Yeah.
So you're kind of self-funding that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
So everybody that has garbage service in East Central Minnesota has been
So we.
prepaying,
Pine
kind of prepaying on it.
Pine County won't be hit with,
No,
or we have to contribute.
if you remember a year ago, we got $100 and some thousand back.
Yeah,
We did a payback
Yeah.
on excess funds we had, so. It's harder right now because I wouldn't expect any rebate because costs have gone up for running a landfill as well. But I don't think you probably see a garbage increase at your house just because everything it costs money to run a garbage truck. That's just the way it is. But our rates have stayed very, very stable as far as the tipping fees. And Pine County, one of the things we try to hit, because that's the goal, is to hit 30% of all our tonnage would get recycled. It's really hard to hit that number because things that are easily recyclable don't weigh very much. Aluminum cans.
oh, that's how you would catch it. Probably.
Yeah, we don't. So we're doing really good at our recycle centers, really good.
I know, but I'll give you a report. Something.
Yeah.
I interrupt you, but I was bringing cardboard up here a week ago, or probably 2 weeks ago. And every cardboard bin was full, flat. That was their first time ever. And they have a lot of cardboard bins. This one right here.
I take some to the Pine City one, just every once in a while, just to check on it. And I have never, ever gone there when I was the only vehicle there. Most of the time, there's half a dozen vehicles there. And they're dumping off everything from first branches to garbage. I've taken extra garbage we've had, $6 a bag, you throw it in there. Tires, mattress, and of course, recyclable stuff.
I know it surprises me.
If you come up with we do have a summer intern this year that's working in our solid waste department, Emma, and she has committed to starting a recycle program at the county fair. So we're going to see how well we can do there. It's a hard, I told her if we could even get all the corn cobs to be in one spot and we extracted them from the landfill, that'd be 5 tons of corn cobs. I don't know. But anyway. Chemical Health Coalition.
Terry, you want to get in?
Do you want to just take it, Matt? And then I'll add it. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
But if you want, I just want to know if you wanted to.
Okay, if I think of anything else, I'll jump in, okay?
Oh, okay. Yeah, standard meeting. It was good. You know, it was a standard meeting with a lot of discussion on the opioid dollars. And how they are supposed to be geared or focused on prevention. And then there was meth is the number one still on, which is kind of, and then opioids are number two for abuse. And then I had, before the meeting, I called our sheriff's office and said, what are the numbers on our ODs, our overdoses, and our deaths? And to that date of July 11th, I think we had our meeting last night. We had 29 overdoses in the county. And 2 of those were deaths for the year, just for the 7 months. This is, that's a big
Lot, isn't it?
yeah. And then our budget, so we, it's sitting at about $13,800 right now. I don't know, did I miss anything major there? There was, oh, I know, probation. Kind of, they brought up they always have that fishing.
Yep.
So, and Kevin says that we're gonna pay for the boppers, that's gonna say Pine County Health Coalition or something like that, which is not much money, it's $180 or something, but it's something. And I think because just think if you were the person going through there, I don't think you're gonna throw it away. Or if it sits around, or then you have a reminder, like a token, really, it's kind of interesting. I never thought about it until after the meeting. I go, if you had that and it meant something to you where you were going in the right direction, you might have some meaning. I don't know.
Yeah, so I'm saying, watch your Robert.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, that's pretty much it.
All right.
I'd just like to add, for the opioid settlement, one of the things that I'm going to be doing tomorrow out here is touring 2 of the family care centers. From what I understand, if you put $1 into this, if you invest $1, you can get anywhere from $4 to $5 for every dollar saved through mental health help or child abuse or whatever. It's just a really good facility. So I'm excited to go tour those tomorrow and then work with Becky to see where it's at and to bring some more stuff to you on that too.
Thanks, Terry.
Yeah, thanks, Terry.
Enjoy. Northeast Area Transportation Partnership. The best thing about that meeting is they've moved to Zoom, so you don't have to drive to 2 Harbors to have a 1.5 hour meeting. But I really appreciate that. And basically it's all presentations. And so I can see those presentations better actually sitting at home on my iPad than I can if I'm in a room that's got 100 people in it. So I appreciate that. It's a good meeting because we have county engineers, county commissioners, all the MnDOT people there that you need to hear from. And I appreciate that they ask for a little input from guys like me. So it's confusing to me because we're in MnDOT District 1, but we're in the planning region with the East Central Community Development Program, and the Northeast does this meeting, and I don't know. So I try to speak up whenever I can so they don't forget Pine County. And they always remember us. So anyway, school is that meeting got changed. It's going to be.
Mr. Chair, maybe just a note, because there's 2 very similar meetings. So this meeting is Pine City Schools, Pine Tech, and Pine County. That meeting has been canceled or it's going to be rescheduled.
Yeah.
Then there is another meeting that is the 4 school districts, Pine County and Pine Tech, next Wednesday. So a week from tomorrow, 6 p.m. at the college. That meeting is still on.
Yep.
The focus of that meeting is going to be the career pathways for technical education, and then also getting reconnected with the school districts because they've had some staff turnover and whatnot. So I think it'll be an opportunity to reconnect with the school districts, talk about the technical education, career pathways with them. So that one is still on.
Thanks for clarifying. Somewhat confused. Lakes and Pines, we met yesterday. I think the big news is our director of 30-some years is retiring. And they were doing second interviews yesterday afternoon. So I thought I would have had an email by now who they picked, but that's coming down the road quickly. The other thing is sometimes we forget, and Terry's predecessor from 2 predecessors ago reminded me once 10 or 12 years ago, make sure you pay attention to what Lakes and Pines is doing. And I said, why is that, Don Lindquist? And he said, because that means a lot of money for the poor people in Pine County, which it does. And so there's yesterday we approved a $67,000 grant for a program that gets administered basically for people that have lost their job and need a place to live. And there's just a host of those kind of programs. So
Mr. Chair.
yes.
Can I back up to?
Yep.
While our.
Yep.
You're still here. So if we're basically gonna do like an in-kind help, is that what I'm getting out of that?
I believe so.
That kind of what you're getting?
I'm not following.
Well, you're just gonna do advisory
For the culverts,
On the
Sandstone Township.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, should we keep track of what we do so we can show?
Well, I'm sure they got a program that tracks every minute of work they do.
Yeah, so I don't know what that means to me, but it still means something.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah.
Would you like to just have a means of kind of quantifying what we do to help townships such as these?
Not in general, but like when you have a project like this and they're coming asking for money.
Yeah.
So when if we're gonna put staff energy into something, that's money to me. You know, in a way.
Yeah.
So that's all I don't know what that means, but it's.
I don't either, but my sense is that the county engineer spends more time working with local jurisdictions, cities and townships than I would have ever guessed.
Yeah.
In a consulting, advising,
Yeah.
helpful way.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
I just want to say thanks for doing that.
Yeah, you bet. We track it. If it's something with a township bridge that ends up becoming a bridge, I track my time, we track our time. If it's something miscellaneous like this, it doesn't really fit.
Okay, that's all. Thank you. And I do have another.
Yeah,
go
ahead.
We had our Kettle River One Watershed kind of a follow up with the advisory committee is going to set up their meeting. So that's all projected out. And the topics are going to, so that, you know, all that core work group with the experts is going to happen. And it's going to be every month, you know, all the way through May. We're not going to meet with them always, but that work is happening.
Right.
At a river. And then there'll be a much more to report on that later.
Okay. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other? No other business? I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thanks, Terry, for joining us.
Thank you. Note to self, if anybody else has meetings outside, your iPad does not like being in the sun for too long. So I'm sorry I blinked out for a little bit there, but thanks. It was a good meeting. Thank you.
Thanks for representing us all. Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun coming back. I am talking, we are presenting for the RDOF fund. So that's going to get presented on Thursday. And I think there's going to be some changes to the language that we had presented in the very beginning. So we've been working with Nathan Zacharias from AMC and then Seamus from NACO. And so I'll keep you updated on what we're going to do and then how the vote goes. So hopefully that'll pass and maybe we'll see some of that RDOF money come into Pine County so that we can get boots on the ground. That would be good.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Enjoy.
Have a good day, everybody.